Hey, welcome to Windsong Month number 5, May. This is going to be very exciting. I'm going to preface this with saying this is a little tougher block. So we want to maybe break this down into 3 or 4 sections. Again, I'll show you where I've broken things down. First thing I want to mention on your cutting instructions, anytime you see a 6-inch or a 5 1/4 inch, do not cut those triangles. You do have the option of cutting them later, but I'm going to show you how to do some hourglass blocks without cutting the triangles so you avoid bias. We're going to start today with a square and a square, 3 3/8 inch square. You're going to take your 3 1/4 inch square, cut that into half. You're going to fold this in half, line those up, press those out, fold this in half, line those up, press those out, and then you're going to square into your 4 1/2 by 4 1/2 inch center. We are making 4 of these blocks. These are 3 1/4 inch squares. You have fabric 2 and fabric 9. You have fabric 5 and fabric 10. Mark your center, sew on either side, 1/4 inch seam allowance from the center. You're going to cut these in half, trim these down to 2 1/2 by 2 1/2. You're going to press to the dark, and you're going to drop your 2 1/2 inch square onto that piece. They are oversized. You're going to line up the diagonal with the diagonal of your ruler. Drop that into the 2 1/2. You've got the diagonal lined up, and you're going to cut a whole bunch of these. You should have a total 16. 8 half square triangles in this colorway, 8 half square triangles in this colorway. From here, you are going to make what I call flower units, corner units. For each corner unit, you're going to have 2 half square triangles and 1 2 1/2 inch square of each of the colors. You are going to use this as the base, and you are going to line up what I call a flower. It's 4 units. I always lay out first. I'm going to lay out my units, and then I'm going to stack, because I am making 8 of these. I'm going to stack 8 green squares, 8 brown squares, 8 units facing this way, and 8 units facing the other way before I start making my pieces. Now, when I sew these together, I'm going to put a square on top of the half square triangle unit, and I'm going to line up the centers, and I'm going to sew from my center out. Then I'm going to take my half square triangle unit, line it up on top of my square, and I'm going to sew from the center out. And the reason I do that is when these units are put together, this is very, very straight, because this is the corner that I sewed from and to, and from and to, and any wackiness is going to end up on the edges, if that makes sense. You're going to press it in opposite directions so you can butt that together and sew your pieces. You are going to line up 8 of these. I only have 4 made, and 8 of these. And let me see if I can find one where I have wackiness on the edges. This one, I have a little wackiness on the edge. I've sewn from my center out. This didn't quite meet. It's, a 32nd of an inch off. I'm not going to worry about it. But if it's a little wacky, I can always make a trim if I need to. Okay? So this might be enough for your first week. This is a lot. These blocks are a lot. Okay, so if you need to stop here, you go right ahead and stop here, take a little break, and come back to the project next week. This is when it gets a little tricky. Now, if you look at your instructions, it asks you to cut the 6-inch squares and the 5.5-inch squares into triangles and sew them all together in different configurations. These hourglass blocks have fabric 2, fabric 6, and fabric 5 on either side. Okay, fabric 2, 6, and 5. One of the ways you can do this is, as the instructions, cut all the triangles and sew them together. But once you cut the triangles, you're working with bias. And bias means movement and stretching. Okay? One of the ways you can mitigate this is by starching. And you would want to starch all your fabric before you cut your pieces, just for a little bit of stabilization. Or you can start with the squares and turn them first into half square triangles. So I have taken a 6-inch square of 5, a 6-inch square of 2, a 6-inch square of 5, and a 6-inch square of 6. I've marked the center, sewn on either side, and now I have 2 half square triangles. Okay, I am going to press towards the fabric 5 on both of them. Now, when I put these together, I'm going to put the 5s on opposite sides, bottom and top. I'm going to line them up so the seams are butting. I'm going to mark the center like I did on this one. Sew a 1/4 inch on either side, and then when I cut this in half, ta-da! By some miracle, it's not a miracle, it's just the way the world works, I'm going to have 2 matching 1/4 square triangles. Now, this really only works to make 1/4 square triangles if 2 sides are matching and then you have opposites, okay? If all 4 are different, this is not gonna work because you're gonna have opposite pieces, like I'm gonna show you later. But this is a way to do hourglass square, hourglass or 1/4 square triangles without having to cut all the triangles and dealing with the bias. Start with the squares, make half square triangles, line them up, mark your center, sew on the 1/4 inch, cut them apart, and from here you can just go ahead and trim to the 4.5 by 4.5. And of course, as you're noticing, when we trim these, we are trimming from the center. Okay, you want to find the picot, the center of your 4.5 by 4.5, 2 1/4, and then trim, flip that over, 4.5 by 4.5, and then trim. Now, if you're looking at your instructions, once you have your 4 hourglass blocks of this green fabric 5, 6, and 2, you are going to take your flower blocks and put them on either side. That's going to be one section of your block. You'll be making 4 of these. We are now making 3-part blocks. Okay, so 3-part blocks, we are going to start with that same half square triangle of your 5 and 6. Okay. You are going to be making 4 3-part blocks of number 1 and number 2. Now, you're going to make a half square triangle. You'll end up with 2 of them, right? 2 half square triangles per cut. You are going to then take the 5.5 inch square of fabric 11, put it on top of one of these, mark your center, sew a 1/4 inch on each side, and then you're going to cut it apart. Now you're going to see what happens here is you're going to get opposite pieces. Okay. You're going to get a triangle with a 5 and 6, and then you're going to get a triangle with a 6 and 5, and that is what you want. Okay, not steering you wrong. This is what you want. You're going to get a triangle with a 5 and a 6, and then a 6 and a 5. Okay, then you're going to trim them to 4.5 by 4.5. You are going to need 4 each of these. You have to sew together these 2 triangles. So after you do your hourglasses, and after you do your 3-part pieces with the dark green and the 2 lighter greens, you're going to have a bunch of squares left. You're going to have a square of fabric number 11, and you're going to have a square of number 5. For this, you do have to cut these into 4 triangles and put them together identically. Okay, so you're going to have 4 of these just like this, with fabric 5 on one side and fabric 11 on the other. Okay, what you're going to do next is you're going to take that, see if I show you this one, it's identical. Fabric 5 on one side, fabric 11, these are all on the same side. I'm going to have 2 pieces of this left. I'm going to leave this as a square. I'm going to line this up onto the square, sew a seam. I'm going to line this up on the square, and you notice how these are opposites now? I'm going to make sure that this is lined up pretty much on the center line here. I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch. I'm going to cut this in half, and I'm going to have a 3-part square, but this is going to have a green, green, and only 1 5. Now, if I cut this off here, which I'm going to do, yay! And I pull this off, open it up, it's identical. Green, green, green. You're going to trim these to 4.5 by 4.5. Okay. Now this piece specifically is going to go in between the pieces of the brown. So we have the fabric 5 facing out, and these 2 brown pieces are going to go on either side of that. I know this is a lot. You may need to watch this again, but we're at the end, and we're going to go ahead and put these blocks together. With a square and a square, we are going to have our hourglass blocks. These are the 3-part blocks. Now these pieces are going to go with the fabric number 6 facing the center, and the fabric number 11 facing up. This is going to come on this side with our 2 brown spaces, and this is going to come on the bottom. This is our hourglass with the 6 in the middle and our flowers on the bottom. Okay, so we want to check, make sure that this is exactly right. Flower out, 6, flower out, square in a square, 6s on the inside, the dark green towards the dark, the 3-part triangle or the 3-part block here with green and the flowers on the outside. Perfect. So these are sewn together. These are sewn together. These are sewn together, and you will be making 4 of these blocks. Okay? This is a long month and we're not over yet. Once these are done, we get to take month 1, month 4, 4, and month 5 and put them together. So join me at the board and we'll see how the center goes.